Oh, this is gonna be crazy. That was great. Alright, hello everyone and welcome today to another episode of SpraynPray1000's Verdict. I am... I don't know why I just did that. I am SpraynPray1000 and today I will be talking about Battlefield 4, the latest in a long-running line of games from the Battlefield franchise. And I'm basically going to be giving a review on Battlefield 4, I guess. I sure hope I know what I'm doing. And, yeah. I'm not sure why this intro is so different from all the other ones, but in any event, let's just hop right into it. So, what is Battlefield 4? Battlefield 4 is a first-person shooter for... Oh, and it's important to note before I actually start, this is a review of the Xbox 360 version. This game is also coming out on next gen, and it's also out on PC. So some problems I might be encountering, might just be because, this is on the 7th gen instead of the 8th generation of consoles, and it's not on the PC. So just so everyone knows, this is a console review, but not just a console review, it's also a review of the 7th generation of consoles. Now that that's out the way, Battlefield 4 is a first-person shooter, pretty much very similar to other franchises, Medal of Honor, Call of Duty, etc., etc. Really, the main emphasis of Battlefield 4 is on, well, it depends. Are you playing multiplayer or are you playing single player? Because the main emphasis, of course, is on multiplayer, like usual. Battlefield typically forgoes single player, like a lot of FPS games typically do. Not all of them, but for the most part. So the gameplay of a first-person shooter is pretty simple, especially in this modern era. You have your sprint button, your shoot button, your look-down sight button. You have all, the same standard controls typically apply in all these different games. The only real thing I could say is that Battlefield definitely has a different feel to it, okay? When you can tell when you're playing a Call of Duty game, you can tell when you're playing a Halo game, and you can tell when you're playing a Battlefield game, not just by looking at the game, but just how it feels to move your character. So in Call of Duty, the sprinting feels kind of weird. In Halo, it feels, I don't know how I would say it. But in Battlefield, it kind of feels like you're moving more of a golf cart than a human. I always kind of use that analogy. It kind of feels like you're moving driving a golf cart instead of making your dude run. And it lends itself well, I guess, to Battlefield. It's not that big of a deal, but you can tell when you're playing a Battlefield game. And the only thing I can really say is they've tried to make the controls for Battlefield 4 different from Battlefield 3 by making them more Call of Duty-ized. Now the B button is your crouch, your stance change button, stuff like that. So the gameplay is pretty much unchanged from Battlefield 3 for the most part, which is pretty much almost unchanged from Bad Company. So the controls have been here for a while. So now let's analyze the single player, okay, just really briefly. The single player of this game features China heavily. If you play Battlefield 3, you'll remember that pretty much for the most part, I believe it was just the Russians and the Americans doing stuff. It wasn't, China wasn't involved. Now, the Battlefield 4 campaign is actually a sequel to the Battlefield 3 campaign, and now China is involved. Basically what is happening is, in China there's like a military coup going on, and one of the politicians, one of the major figureheads, is basically presumed dead, okay? So this military coup is going on, and this American squadron of Marines, I believe, called Tombstone, has to travel to China and basically evacuate essential VIPs, that are allied with America. And now the story progresses from there. There's a lot of stuff that happens, a lot of interesting things. You play as, I believe his name is like Daniel or David Recker. He becomes the squadron leader of Tombstone, and pretty much the gameplay of the game is, your standard first-person stuff. You have your squad behind you. They're going to help you out in combat. And what you actually can do in this game is you can actually issue orders to them. So, for example, by tapping right bumper, and I assume R2 or whatever button it is on PS3, you can actually tell them to attack all the enemies you have in your line of sight. There's also combat binoculars you can use to mark out enemies, see explosives, basically get a good view of your environment before or during a gunfight. And I will say, they definitely did try to make the gunplay a lot more diverse. They definitely did try to make this game, the story a bit more flowing as compared to Battlefield 3, which really felt like it was just kind of a Call of Duty Black Ops knockoff for the campaign. And I will say, the campaign of this game is very interesting. I think I even said on my podcast I would give this campaign like a 7 out of 10. It was pretty good. Now, there were some disappointing parts. I think the part that's really a major throwback to Battlefield 3's campaign was disappointing. It was kind of short-lived. It was kind of... But for the most part, the campaign was interesting. I definitely was hooked up until the end. The one thing I will say, though, is and this is the kind of thing that they always do in these FPS campaigns, okay? They try to do like Half-Life style, where you play as a silent protagonist who says absolutely nothing. And pretty much, you play as a guy who just, they try to integrate him into the dialogue by asking, oh, Rekka, how do you feel about this? And then, obviously because you're silent, you don't say anything, there's no voice actor. I guess it's this whole feeling that they really want to put you into the character's shoes, but a lot of games are kind of moving away from that, which would actually be interesting. I'd like to see what Half-Life does with that, although I'm pretty sure Half-Life will stick to what Half-Life has been doing for a long time. Because it's very awkward at some points. At some points, you're just kind of like this guy who's just there, and your people are interacting with you, and you're kind of like, oh, I can't say anything. So the response is interpreted. It's assumed what you would say, and it's very weird at some points. And this campaign, they try and do it a lot for some reason. I'm not sure why, but for the most part, the campaign is enjoyable. Is it replayable? I don't know. A lot of people who play these FPS games don't really play it too often, but I think the story was definitely pretty interesting. Although, some of the plot twists you could see coming, typically, like a lot of these other FPS campaigns. So, campaign, 7 out of 10, pretty good, not too bad. At least it's better than if they didn't have one. You know what I mean? At least they had one. You could say they had one. It was fun. It was enjoyable. And I'm picking up a soda. I should not be drinking that. I should be drinking water. So, what about the main meat of the game, okay? This game actually got rid of the co-op that Battlefield 3 had, so that DICE could focus more on perfecting the campaign and perfecting the multiplayer. So already we can say that the campaign is a bit better. It's not perfect, it's a bit better. Now, what about the multiplayer? For the most part, again, the multiplayer is Battlefield 3. I'm not going to try and deny that. As I even said a couple of times, Battlefield 3, towards the end of its lifespan, it kind of felt like it wasn't really its own game, but rather just a beta for Battlefield 4. So, of course, everyone knows this because they won't shut up about it. Battlefield 4 runs on the Frostbite 3 engine, which is apparently an updated version of the Frostbite 2 engine, which is, Battlefield games have been using this since Bad Company. Some version of the Frostbite engine. I think in Bad Company 1 or Bad Company 2 they use Frostbite 1.5. I don't know. But now most EA games are actually going to run on Frostbite 3. So for example, the next Mass Effect game that's definitely coming out because they need to milk that franchise more is going to run on Frostbite 3. Need for Speed Rivals, which is actually coming out next week, is also going to run on Frostbite 3. All these different games are going to run on Frostbite 3. So Frostbite 3, I know I've said it a million times now. Is it really, really great? Is it, the ridiculously overhyped engine that they basically claim it is? Again, I'll say the exact same thing I said for Battlefield 3. No, it really isn't. However, unlike Battlefield 3, I think the way that they implemented it in this game is way better than what they did in Battlefield 3. In Battlefield 3, pretty much all that would happen is you could make holes in the ground, and of course, consoles, I'm talking about on the consoles. I cannot stress that enough because someone's probably going to watch this and say, that's not how it is on PC. Well, I didn't play it on PC, okay? I'm sorry, I didn't. I played it on consoles with my friends. So, Just so everyone's aware, and probably someone's still going to miss that anyway. On consoles, pretty much all you could do is make holes in the ground and basically punch through cover. Now, obviously, you might be laughing at me saying, oh, that's what I get for playing on console. Whatever, I really don't, again, to me, this is something that really was a minor thing to me. I don't care. And I don't have a $2,000 PC I'd be able to record from anyway. So, punch holes through stuff. And that was pretty disappointing in Battlefield 3. Like, most of the destruction was scripted. And it was. It was pretty scripted. Now, in Battlefield 4, you can do all that and then some. So now trees topple, although that did happen before. Now actually they have something called Levolution, where the entirety of the map or portions of the map will change depending on how the battle plays out between the players. So for example, on Siege of Shanghai, there's a building that you can make collapse just by shooting out all the load-bearing columns on it. So pretty much the building has nothing to stand on, therefore it collapses. Actually, there's sometimes objectives on that building, and what will happen is as the building, collapses and as it comes down, the map will fill with dust, okay, because a building collapsed. And it looks pretty cheesy the way it sinks into the ground, but that's funny. At least it sinks. And it will actually change the layout. So instead of having a waterfront right in front of the skyscraper, it will become like a miniature peninsula made by the debris and stuff, and then now players will fight in the debris. Players can actually be killed by the collapsing building, whether or not it falls on top of them or whether or not they're inside the building as it falls and they fail to jump out. So there's a lot of stuff that can happen with that, and it's on other maps as well, but I feel Siege of Shanghai was where they put the most emphasis. I believe on another map you can actually make a dam collapse or break a part of the dam. There's a lot of stuff you can do with it. You can level buildings now a bit easier than Battlefield, where only portions of it would fly off, or Battlefield 3. So for the most part, the multiplayer, the destruction, great. The graphics, I think they got rid of that stupid blue tent, or at least they turned it down. Now the graphics look pretty cool. Now the multiplayer, just the class-based multiplayer has changed. Now for those of you who are unfamiliar with Battlefield, Battlefield has always used a class-based multiplayer setup. So whenever you deploy or whenever you join a game of multiplayer, you're asked, at the starting or at the deploy menu, which is basically where you get a tactical overview of the what's going on in front of you. You're asked what kit or what class you want to play. So typically the classes are assault, which has assault rifle. It has an assault rifle or other powerful weapon. Basically your frontliners. They have medic equipment now thanks to Battlefield 3. And they have grenade launchers, underbarrel shotguns, that kind of thing. There's recon, who are the snipers. They're meant to hang back and try and pick off people. And this is a very, very weird class, because in Bad Company 2 they had C4 and they had laser designators, and then they got rid of that and they gave them motion sensors and other useless garbage in Bad Company or in Battlefield 3, and I was like, what the fuck? Why'd they ruin this class? And now they kind of brought it back, so that'd be pretty interesting to screw around with. They have support, who has been changed in Battlefield 3 to basically deploy ammo. They use light machine guns and other heavy weapons. They can use mortars, claymores, that kind of stuff. And then you have engineers, whose main job is to repair stuff and use carbines and other smaller weapons. They're like the vehicle experts. They're the experts at repairing and destroying vehicles. So pretty much for the most part, the classes remain unchanged from Battlefield 3 to Battlefield 4. I'm trying to think. What they did do is they did get rid of the whole faction-based gameplay, okay? So basically, in Battlefield 3, before you mastered your kit, okay, which is basically you acquire enough points to master it and get a service star with it, you would have to unlock the other faction's weapons for both factions. So for example, if you were just starting out the game, if you were to play as Russians, you would not have access to the American gun, and vice versa. If you play as Americans, you don't have access to the Russian gun until you master the kit. Then you can use every faction weapon, doesn't matter what faction you deploy as. And for me, that was kind of annoying, because I specialized as support using an American gun. So for 50% of my matches, I couldn't even use the gun I really liked using, the M27 IAR. Now, that has changed in Battlefield 4. In Battlefield 4, you can use basically you start out with a default gun and then you go from there. So it's more linear, the unlocks. You don't get a choice between a couple of different guns. And in fact, the leveling up system is entirely different in and of itself. The level up system, instead of leveling up your kit, each kit would have its own level bar, and then you would have a general level bar for your, just what rank you are, like in Battlefield 3. In Battlefield 4, you have your general level bar, I believe, your 4 kit bars, and then each kit has its own sub-level. So, for example, instead of unlocking light machine guns after light machine guns by progressing your kit, you actually unlock light machine gun after light machine gun by using earlier light machine guns. So, what you would get, so for example, the next light machine gun is unlocked by the light machine gun tree. The next gadget is unlocked by progressing the support tree. The next handgun is unlocked by progressing the handgun tree, etc., etc., etc. Depending on what class you play as. Also, classes can now mix and match weapons. So, for example, if you're playing support, you could, if you have prowess in engineering or in recon, you can use DMRs or carbines. And that being said, they've also added a whole new list of weapons. So, for example, in Battlefield 4, there were pretty much what was it? It was assault rifles, snipers, light machine guns, and carbines, which were the 4 basic classes of weapons for each of the classes. Then they had personal defense weapons and shotguns, which were available to all classes. Well, now they've expanded on that. So now there's assault rifles, designated marksman rifles or DMRs, shotguns, carbines, submachine guns, I'd like to say, or PDWs. It's one of the two. Snipers, light machine guns, and I think that's it. And now basically DMRs, carbines, and shotguns are available to all classes, okay? Like before. So each class can kind of basically adds diversity to the class. Now you can really mix and match your class, basically making it more versatile. And just some of the stuff that they've really done is really interesting. The vehicles, they've nerfed vehicles. Vehicles now have limited but regenerating ammo instead of infinite ammo. I like that. I like the diversity. They did the same thing in the campaign. They really tried to diversify it, add some vehicle battles in the campaign, and multiplayer definitely, step it up from what it was in Battlefield 3. So I liked it. I'm going to be honest. I'm very skeptical of Battlefield. I thought that Bad Company 2 was really great, and Battlefield 3 was a disappointment on a bunch of different levels. But I like Battlefield 4. Battlefield 4, to me, feels like what we're going to get, the best of both worlds. That being said, the Bad Company campaign is just hilarious. It's still funny. It's not Bad Company standards in the campaign, but the multiplayer is very good. Campaign is at least interesting, and I enjoyed it. Very nice. I think the DICE did a very good job for this game, and I'm going to reward them for that. So, this game, I think if you're looking for a competitive multiplayer game for this year or anytime, in the next year or so, you couldn't go wrong. Battlefield 4 is probably the game for you. Now, what I will say is this game is very teamwork heavy. So if you don't have someone, if you don't have people who you can really team up with, like friends or, dedicated people online, you're probably not going to enjoy it too much. You're probably better off playing another more lone wolf friendly game. But they definitely have a diverse amount of game modes, some of which are hit or miss. Others are pretty good. So for example, you have your classic Battlefield Rush, Conquest, Squad Deathmatch, and now Team Deathmatch returns. And then they have a bunch of new game modes, Obliteration, which is pretty much like football. You have to bomb 3 objectives with no time limit. There's also Defuse, which is kind of like Counter-Strike mode, which is very awkward, very weird, very glitchy. Domination, which is pretty much the exact same game mode from Call of Duty. And other stuff. So I think that the only thing that they really need to do now is basically idiot-proof and foolproof the game. So instead, they need to fix the console freeze, they need to fix a lot of this other stuff, and then the game will be really good. So, what would I give Battlefield 4? I would give Battlefield 4, surprisingly, a really, really good score. I think a lot of people that know me, and know what I said about Battlefield 3, are going to be surprised by this score. I'm going to give Battlefield 4 an 89 out of 100. Because it's just that good. It's a must-buy if you're looking for a competitive multiplayer or if you're looking to play with friends, you know, this game is definitely lends itself to playing with friends. So I'm going to give it an 89 because I was really impressed. I was really blown away, literally, like the cover. And I think that they fixed a lot of the problems, and all that's left to do is really just, you know, patch up the couple of leaks here and there, and they can have a really great game here. So 89, definitely a great job by DICE. I really enjoyed it. You know, of course, the one thing I will say, and obviously I didn't deduct any points from the actual game for this, but the stupid advertisements where they have people who are basically paid to say this stuff. Oh, I didn't even know that was possible in a video game. How many video games have you played? You know what I mean? But that's another story. Hitting on the stupid, you know, retarded advertisements for this game. That's another story. Not going to jump into that. What we have here, the game, ignoring the stupid advertisements, is really good. I definitely recommend you at least check it out. If I were to say buy, wait, rent or sell, or skip, I always say sell for some reason. Buy it. It's worth it. You're going to get your $60 worth. There's definitely a long multiplayer, you know, the multiplayer is the main meat of this game, obviously, so if you're looking for a multiplayer game, this is it. But if you're looking for a really, really good campaign experience, you're probably barking up the wrong tree. And that's pretty much what this game has to offer, you know. Again, I assume that if you're into Battlefield, you're looking for multiplayer. So that's going to be it for this episode. I'm actually going to do another episode right after this. I don't know if I'll upload them right back to back, but I want to do it right now. So thank you guys for listening. Hopefully you guys go out there and enjoy this game. Definitely a really surprisingly good score for me. I can tell you, I have not told Surged or 2 about this. I have not told any of my friends, so they're going to be pretty blown away when I say what I gave this game. So Battlefield 4, 89. Congratulations, DICE. You know, you actually put in work, and you deserve this good score.